Welcome to ModCast, a civilization podcast focused on modding.
Kenneth, Ferland,
Tony Kiehl, Peter Steenbeke,
Wouter, Snijders.
With guest co-host Soren Johnson. That's all we're here for is the squiggles.
It's all about the squiggles.
Yeah, so I was playing your mod Maniac last night on my netbook.
Netbook, okay.
And I got it working on a little tiny-ass netbook, and then it finally crashed.
What resolution does that have?
I use a 1300 by 768, and then I maximize screen to make it work. It's like the netbooks, the Civ doesn't work on netbooks usually, but there's a good fix. That crashed, so then I started playing Spore again, and I was playing Spore Galactic Adventures.
Oh yeah? Cool.
Yeah, that game's pretty, it's pretty fun. I enjoy Spore. Every now and again.
Yeah, I guess I could assume Galactic Adventures would definitely have some interest.
It's made by great guys, so...
For modders.
Okay, so let's introduce ourselves.
Yes. Well, then fine. Welcome to ModCast, episode, what, 38?
No,
I think?
special episode.
ModCast super duper special episode with a cherry on top.
I don't know, Tony. I mean, the guest lineup is going downhill a bit. I mean, this guy doesn't make mods. I mean, hasn't played any mods. Why would anyone care what he has to say?
Oh, Wouter. Wouter, you need to go back to your Netherland cave.
You don't have caves. It's all flat.
The caves are under the dikes. But anyways.
Okay, so let's do a little roll call.
This is a super duper special episode. Yeah, that's what I was getting into, but we have all the shit talkers out today, so... Alright, today we are joined with Kenneth, Impaler WRG Ferland.
Greetings, mortals.
Wouter, Locutus, Snijders.
That's your cue, Ken. Hello.
Peter, Maniac, Steenbeke.
Good night, everyone.
Oh yes, it's late for him. With me, Tony GarretSidzaka Kiehl, as usual, and with one of our, I'd say, best guests ever in any podcast ever created, Soren Johnson, creator of the code for Civ 3 and production lead in Civ 4, working with Spore with Will Wright, and on 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 and on. How you doing today, buddy? Joe? He's actually one of them.
Yeah, apparently. But no, it's great to all get an update on what's going on with the Civ 4 mod community. I knew that, it would have a long lifespan, and, it's, even though I've, moved on from Civ 4 for quite a while, it's neat to see, things still growing, things still active, and things still changing.
And, Civ is the game that keeps giving. Civ 4 was just, I think, perfectly designed to be expandable, and I think perfectly designed, as you originally said, Civ 4 is not a game as much as it is a modding platform. Yeah,
that's right. I tried to think of it as a turn-based strategy platform, essentially. It seems like that's worked out pretty well.
I think about 8 months ago, it was back on the top 10 list, and that's like 4 years after it was released, and it came back on the top 10 seller list on PC.
Now.
That is nuts.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty cool. That was neat to see.
That was nuts. I mean, who's keeping 2K afloat at this point? You know what I'm saying?
Well, there is this little Grand Theft Auto thing that it slightly contributes, but... Yeah,
all right, well, I'll tell you what. I haven't played Grand Theft Auto, but I have played a lot of Civ and Spore and all those other things.
Yeah, Spore does not keep 2K afloat, seeing as how it's made by EA either.
Yeah, that helps.
Speaking of which, how is it over there with Will Wright and all those fun people?
It's going pretty well. I'm no longer sort of involved with Spore per se, but there's still a lot of interesting projects going on under that franchise, and most of which I think I can't talk about. But I moved on to working on browser-based strategy games. Currently, I'm still kind of a team of one, so things are just going slowly, just the way things were when we started up Civ 4, and but I'm really excited with what's going on. I'm excited the possibilities of what you can do in a browser now. Things just are changing really quickly, and I think the tech now is probably somewhere where games were back in maybe the late 80s or something like that.
Okay, well, one of the things I wanted to start off with, I mean, for some of our listeners who aren't so familiar with this, tell us a little bit about how your career developed. I mean, from school to all the places you worked at before and after Firaxis. Just give us kind of a little bit of a timeline in that respect.
Well, I was at Stanford back in the late 90s, and I kind of always like to joke that Civilization was sort of the perfect, the only game I could ever work for, because when I was in school, I double majored in history and computer science, and I actually tried to combine the two. Like, I had my history honors thesis or whatever, and my CS final project were actually the same thing. And so, as soon as I was able to as soon as I graduated, that was good timing, because it just happened to be when Brian Reynolds was leaving Firaxis to form Big Huge Games. And the upshot of that was that suddenly Civ 3 lost its development team. And so, it was really great timing for me. So then I sent my resume into Firaxis, flew out, met Sid, met Jeff. They hired me for that project. And I think at that point there was probably about a year and a half to go until we shipped Civ 3. So I started off, I think, just working on, getting some of the basic new concepts working for Civ 3, worked on the AI, came up with some of the ideas for the new diplomacy system, the resources, the culture. So I was eventually able to get a co-design credit on Civ 3. Then I was definitely heavily involved in the, I guess we'll tactfully refer to as the patching process of that game, and which was actually, I think, probably my biggest, really what I would think of as the pivotal moment of my career, actually, was that patching process, because that was the first time, I sort of really was waded in deep into the community and saw, what you can learn from the community. There's certainly people that, you're not necessarily going to be able to get good feedback from, but then there's tons and tons of people who can give you incredible feedback, and being able to filter through that noise is really, really important. And I think that we made, really, really great progress on Civ 3 as the first, second, third, fourth, patch came out. And I was pretty decently happy with the single player of Civ 3 by the time we finished up the last patch for the first expansion. But that was a long process, and it taught me a lot about what's possible if you engage the community about how they like your product. So when it came time to start working on Civ 4, which I was basically the first man on that project, one of the first things I said was really important was that we could that we'd always be able to first of all, that we'd always be able to have a playable prototype. That's a game that we'd be playing amongst ourselves all the time.
That's the Firaxis way.
Yeah, exactly. And we also really wanted to finally make a multiplayer version of Civ, which worked. And the only way to do that would be to, as they say in the software industry, eat our own dog food. Where every Wednesday night, we'd play a 2-hour game of Civ 4, and see what we liked, see what we didn't like. That went on for basically the first year of the project. But then the other thing I thought was really important is that I wanted to get the community involved in Civ 4 as early as possible. So about a year and a half before we shipped the game, we brought on some of the sort of the leading lights of the Civ fan community into a private beta to test the game out. We got people from the single-player community, from the multiplayer community, from the modding community, so they each felt like they had an equal say in what we were developing with the game.
From the Call to Power community?
Oh, the Call to Power community, yes, and yeah, and it was. When I started Civ 4, I actually really did not know. For years and years, I had seen people talk about how great the modding was for Call to Power and how important modding was, and it was just something I had very little experience with during Civ 3. So. Actually, a lot of the modding that did work out for Civ 3 was could be credited to some of the other people on the team, especially Mike Breakwright, who put a lot of effort into making a good editor for Civ 3. So when I started Civ 4, I really went back and I looked at the mods for Civ 2. I looked at I think that's when I contacted Wouter, I think, to ask him about what's the deal with Call to Power? Why was everyone so excited about what it could do? And just trying to see, what was I missing? What could be done with a great moddable strategy game? And so, I tried to engage everyone. I wanted Civ 4 to be a big tent, that everyone was invited to, Yeah, and I guess, worked on that project for 2.5 years. It came out, did very well. We've seen some really interesting mods, and it's also been a really popular game. So, it's been...
I personally didn't have anything to do with Civ 4 until it came out.
Yeah, so it came out. But yeah, I mean, it was, I think a lot of people felt like they were...
that's actually when I stopped being a lurker, when you were doing that Civ 4 community.
Yeah, well, there's certainly, I think, some people who were in sort of wait and watch the mode with Civ 4. They were going to believe it when they saw it, which is fine.
Well, I think this brings up an interesting point that I wanted to ask you about. The way that modding has changed from Civ 3 to Civ 4, I think in Civ 3 you had more basically people making scenarios. It's kind of a set-piece battle, specific time, specific place, all the cities laid out, etc., etc. And in Civ 4, it seems we've got a lot more dominance of like the total remakes. Is this just because the tools are available? I mean, is the total remake what people really want to make, and the scenario is kind of, that's more the fallback if we don't have the really powerful tools that allow us to make a total remake?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, because I definitely feel like the tools we provide kind of definitely dictates what the output is. Like Civ 2, for example, had a really great event system, right? But the actual ability to mod some of the values in the game was to some extent limited, I believe. Wasn't there kind of a hard cap on how many units you could have, or I forget all these details, but it seemed there was still some stuff about some of the buildings and units that were still somewhat hard-coded into the game, but it had a really powerful trigger and event system, right?
Well, some guys did reverse engineer some of that stuff.
Eventually.
Okay, well that's cool, but it seems like a lot of the best Civ 2 mods were kind of these like I remember this one great Fellowship of the Ring one, this interesting one that was like the Odyssey, one that was the interesting Jules Verne mod, where it was all about these really complicated trees of all these different things that could happen if you step here, this pops up here, and all this stuff that didn't feel like a normal Civ game, but created kind of almost more of a storybook feel. And then when you moved on to Civ 3, we really opened up the data to modding, where we really stuck to this belief that there's no such thing as a temple, there's no such thing as a spearman. We were neutral on the data that came in that determined what the units and the buildings and technologies were. Could be anything at all, which meant the AI didn't make any assumptions about what to build, and the game rules didn't make any assumptions about what buildings and units were there. And so that led to what I always found the most interesting, well, I guess two of the most interesting Civ 3 mods to me, which was Rise mod, which all his names are very similar, so I forget which one it was exactly called, and the Double Your Pleasure mod, which were all sort of very data-intensive mods. So that's actually what...
Double Your Pleasure was technically a kitchen sink mod.
Well, yeah. And so when I think of Civ 3 modding, that's actually what I tend to think of, is like the ones that were focused on altering the rules through data. But I honestly, from a player, have never really been much of a scenario guy. So I definitely just will take your word for it that there were a ton of great Civ 3 scenarios, and I think that's definitely a result of sort of that comprehensive map editor that was provided with Civ 3. Something which I definitely think you could say.
To be fair, I think that was mostly Civ 2. Civ 3
What's that?
Civ 3 had less of. I think Civ 3 had less of that. It was especially Civ 2 had a lot of scenarios. So, like you said, because of the event system, yeah.
So for me, I guess I usually think of Civ 2 as having all these great scenarios, and then Civ 3 had some interesting very data intensive mods where, it was all about changing the game by altering the numbers behind the units and buildings and stuff. And also the ability to have, essentially as many texts as you wanted to. And then with Civ 4, it was very much, we were just trying to expose everything we possibly could. So, not just the data, but, the interface and the AI and, everything we possibly could allow you to mod, we did, with the exception of some kind of hard-coded graphical stuff. And so, so I guess that's the interesting question. Like, are these sort of like open-ended random map mods what people want, or is it just because that kind of flows more naturally with what Civ 4 always is? I think making scenarios is cool and interesting. Is kind of cool and interesting, but if we didn't see many more of that at Civ 4, it's probably because we didn't necessarily provide a very user-friendly map and scenario editor like was available in Civ 2. And data editor as was available in Civ 3. So I think with Civ 4 you saw a lot more kind of team-based mods, where people are interested in modding, kind of were looking around for projects to join. This has always been true, but I just felt like it was especially true with Civ 4, where they could kind of pool their resources, and some people would organize the mods, and other people would focus on art, and other people would focus on text or whatever. And so I think that's probably why we've seen more total conversions.
That's been a big factor. You're getting team sizes of up 5 and 6 people. Someone usually being a designer / programmer. It actually starts to look like the professional teams where you have a division of labor into design, programming, and art.
Especially Fall from Heaven. Fall from Heaven, great example.
Yeah. They're definitely a classic example, and it's been interesting. That kind of mirrors the developments in the professional game industry itself. These teams are really diversifying and growing.
My experience is kind of different. I kind of see that most of the big mods are still made by one big guy. Fall from Heaven, Kiehl, Rise and Fall, Rye, and
Well, there's one lead man.
There's one guy with
sure.
a vision, but it takes a whole team too.
And there's this one crazy guy who does Planetfall. That guy's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, but perhaps I'm an exception. But usually the guys who contribute, except for me, they constantly rotate. Someone stays 6 months, but then leaves, and then someone other joins, and so it's usually constantly shifting. So my impression is, in some ways it's a team project, but in other ways it's still
I think
solo project.
You're never quite alone with your internet because there's so many resources and people who just want to do a little something to help or give you feedback, though.
And
yes, indeed.
I think it's those mods that make it. If there's one guy behind it that's really, really passionate and keeps pushing, keeps keeping the project alive, that's why there's usually the best mods are the ones with one guy behind it, because he's constantly been pushing it and keeping it alive.
Yes, that's always important. You see people coming up with like, hey, let's have this as a mod, and it's like, and they're constantly asking for something on the internet. It's like, oh, could someone make this? This would be a cool idea. And it's like, nothing happens unless someone gets behind it and decides to do it.
Yeah, you tell people to do it themselves. You want a mod.
There are people who don't know a lick of programming and learn to program just so they can make the mod they want.
What to me is interesting is, I think that's mirrored between the professional game industry and the mod community as well. It's like, I think most great games, you can usually say there's like, there's some one guy behind it who like is ultimately responsible for the quality of the project and pushing things forward. And I think you see that in a lot of creative projects, definitely. But even like
definitely,
even projects which are more solo affairs, like I think just the way the mod community has developed in places like Civ Fanatics, there's very few people who aren't pulling bits and pieces from other projects. Like one of the things I always found very interesting was going on to the forums and seeing the I forgot even the name of it, but basically like the mod component sub forum, which was just like chunks that people could grab for their mods, and like that's fantastic, right? Because that really is allowing people to develop stuff rapidly and work modularly, and I can build off of you and you can build off of me, like that's really cool.
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff that was kind of involved in that angle of trying to make it even easier to put chunks together. You know, the whole thing we did with the XML to basically load more XML files, and I was involved in this project where we were trying to basically put a bunch of the code chunks together that everyone had written into one DLL so that you could use it without having to actually recompile the whole thing. You know, there was limited success on some of these things just because it's so wide and diverse, and everyone's
those were interesting projects.
going in a million different directions. So, it's always going to be tricky.
So going back to, you said there's no really easy-to-use scenario editor or a map editor or anything like that for Civ 4. Was that a very deliberate decision?
Yeah, it was a deliberate decision. We only had so many resources, and every time it came down to the decision of exposing, like at some point, like we didn't originally exposing the code, for example, was not originally on the plan. It was just something I just kept pushing for, right? And
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, right. I mean,
I think you made a lot of people a lot of money for that, by the way.
Yeah, and I mean, I would love to be on one of these projects where you don't have to make these choices, but if you had to choose between a scenario editor and exposing the code to a DLL, which would you choose, right? And I'm sure there might be some people who prefer a scenario editor, but I mean, I made my choice, and that's what we ended up with.
Well, there's a few good editors that the community came out with already. So, like MapView, great guy.
Yeah, and
great guy.
I don't want to say like this is what I was planning for, but I was definitely hoping that some of that stuff would develop. I don't think there's really been like. Yeah, certainly a perfect one that would rival, what you might see in Civ 2. But, that was definitely part of the concept that, the XML files are, a standard format, and also that just the fact that the map scenario files are just plain text, just a very simple file format. I knew that people would build, sort of off-the-shelf, editors to work with these. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it came out a bit, and I wanted to say this, but you should have gone a little bit further with the editor, because I'd say that's one of the only weak point in the modding of Civ 4 is the world map editor, to be quite honest. But that's it. That's the weakness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we recognize that, and I guess there was two things. One was resources, and the other was kind of a leftover from the Civ 3 experience where we felt like putting Chrome onto editing became a really big bottleneck in the process, if that makes sense to you guys. Having the really nice Civ 3 rules editor, for example, and I think we made totally the right decision by just sticking with XML and just leaving it at that, not trying to wrap that stuff in some sort of editor. But the problem was, anytime anyone added a new piece of data or a new chunk to the game or new value that could be altered, Mike would have to go into the editor and find a new place for. I remember at one point he was just running out of space on the page for buttons and pull-down menus and list boxes and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I remember that thing.
Yeah, I mean it just got ridiculous. And I think there was definitely a fear that type of thing would happen if we really committed full on to a map and scenario editor for Civ 4. So that was part of why that decision got made. I mean, my hope would be, if going forward, people are trying to learn from Civ 4, they would see that's an opportunity, to make the project even better,
Yeah.
So yeah,
Totally. Okay, someone asked another question.
Well, do we want to move on from Civ 4 into some of the newer stuff? Let's go to Spore now, or?
I would like to talk about Spore then, if that's the case, because we've gone to Civ 4, and Civ 4 is reaching its age limit, I think, in a year or two. But a game that's more recent and in some ways more ambitious, if you've played it, is Spore. Now, Spore, I don't think, has the technical depth.
Yeah, it only tries to simulate the entire history of the universe. It's a little bit more ambitious.
Yeah, it goes, instead of starting at 4000 BC, like we're all used to, with a guy with a big wooden stick, we actually start a little bit earlier to, 1 billion years after the creation of the Earth. And you start as a little cartoon single-cell organism, which, by the way, the scientists were kind of irritated with the cartoonish aspect of evolution, but I love it. Then you eat you can choose to eat plants or meat. and then you go on to become a creature who leaves the ocean and evolves new body parts to better interact or fight creatures, and then after you've become the biggest brain creature on the planet, you become a tribe, and then it's a real-time strategy with a bunch of little members of your tribe. Then the civilization stage, which I understand that Soren had fingers in very heavily, where you try to dominate the rest of the globe of your countrymen, of the rest of the world. And then after all that is the biggest stage of all, which is the galaxy. And you literally have an entire galaxy with, I think it would take you 600 years to visit every star or something. 600 real-life years to visit every star.
Yep.
But yeah, that's kind of nuts. But, Soren, what do you got to say about how did you like that? Something.
Well, Spore is an interesting game to work on. I mean, to me, the thing that really pulled me in from coming from the outside of the project was just the concept of procedural content and pollination, and the fact that the Sims community was also looking at, they had also a really big modding community. And I think when they were building Spore, they were looking at them as well as thinking, like, how can we make their jobs easier for them? How can we, internalize what they're trying to accomplish, which is, they want to make all this cool content and share it with people. But, it's the same issue that a lot of Civ modders face, which is they do all this great work, but how many people are actually out there looking for Civ mods, right? So with Spore, the idea is like, hey, let's give people these great editing tools in the game and just make sharing stuff automatic. That's something that happens no matter what. It's just part of the play experience. And like to me, that was what was really cool about the Spore project.
Kind of like modding is the game now.
And yeah, I got to be involved heavily with the civilization level of that game. Got to work on sort of polishing up the design for that. Over the last, I guess, year and a half. And writing the AI for that, and just doing some work trying to get that level where it needed to be to ship. It was Spore is a really big game, and it was it was a production challenge, that's for sure.
Now, is the design of something like Spore? I mean, like, I imagine Will White is at the top of the whole pyramid here. But is it pretty much sliced up into each section of the game has its own sub-design?
Yeah, each section.
And you were in charge of the
each section of the
civilization.
game definitely had like its own team essentially. And there were some designers who were over multiple areas. The space one was the one that was kind of the biggest and had kind of the most designers with their fingers in the pie. But yeah, the teams are kind of split up, and Will was kind of there as someone to play the game regularly, give us advice, and talk to each one of the individual teams about.
So he's basically the Dawn.
The thought of what they were doing, and how what they're doing was fitting. One of the big challenges with Spore is this concept of continuity. How you get one level to fit into the next level to fit into the next level. It's putting all these games into one game was a big challenge, and would people understand that on one level they were controlling a single character, and then suddenly they were they didn't have an avatar and they were controlling the whole civilization. Like how would people handle that? And then when you go to space, you go back to controlling an avatar. It's a pretty big interface and conceptual challenge.
And I think it was executed well. I think the replay value is high. But for me, I play in spurts with Spore. Like I will play, make some creatures, and then I will break and then go back. Also, we did cover the first Spore mods in a show last season. I don't know if you remember, Soren. Do you?
No, I don't remember that one actually.
Yeah, go in the archive. It's some guy made a mod. He modded the space game. He made it hack. Remember?
Yeah, okay, I think I remember that.
Okay,
yeah.
He made the asymmetry hack, which I made I made a beholder from D&D with that hack. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Spore is kind of funny because in a sense it was like the most moddable and least moddable game ever because
Ken, you said that before.
Because the modding was so...
Yeah, modding is the game now.
Yeah, it's so integral to the game that like modding it outside of the game was not easy at all. And it wasn't meant to be. I mean, that it was meant to be like a walled garden, essentially, of modding. And I think that's a challenge. Anytime because at Firaxis, we exposed a lot for Civ 4, but after that, we kind of took a hands-off approach. We're like, this is how we're developing the game, and if you discover these files, then, fine, but we take no responsibility for it whatsoever. And there's a big advantage to doing that.
I see.
Yeah, it's almost like in Spore, when they're providing you certain paths of modability, which is making the creatures and making all the other stuff that's part of the game. You've got a well-trodden path there, but everything else off of that, almost by definition, has to be restricted in order to make that path work.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely true. Although, I was really excited to see what they did with the expansion to Spore, though. Like, I feel like that's really a great direction.
That's Galactic Adventures, right?
To head. Right, yeah, because that allows people to, build their own worlds and have, these rules inside them and victory conditions and, create experiences for other players. I think for a lot of people, Spore...
I think City of
Heroes, City of Villains. Yeah, they created it.
They have the story editor, don't they?
Yeah, they have an editor in there that lets you create missions, which leads to some interesting problems when you can actually create experience points. You can get actually experience points and items from those missions. Unfortunately, we didn't have to deal with that problem. But yeah, there's a lot of companies that are interested. Obviously, Little Big Planet's another one that is in this space. So yeah, there's a lot of companies that are interested in experimenting with these type of ideas. Modding going mainstream.
Do you think that's like the future of modding? That modding is going to become the game, or is this sort of Civ 4 approach of here's the code, do what you want with it? Is that sort of on its way out? Do you think?
Well, that's a really good question. I can't give you the answer for that. I think that the best case is someone who can really wrap things up well so that they can do both.
Mm-hmm.
That you can expose what's available in Civ 4, but then find a safe way to present that information to players. That modding stuff to players. I know that I'm curious to see what Stardock comes up with their next game, their fantasy game, which has 2 titles, so I can never remember either of them. So Brad will be upset with me. I don't remember the name, but I told him
he's been working on that for a couple of years, though.
Yeah, they're working on it for a while. I told him he should change the title too. What is the name of that game? I was like, what is the name of that game? Elemental Magic? Elemental something?
Elemental War of Magic.
Yeah, something like that.
Elemental, we'll just call it that. But anyway, they're going to allow you to mod stuff in the game, and then they're going to be saving that for you server side so that your stuff will be pollinated to other players. So I guess that I could imagine that's maybe like a Civ 4 mod that was XML only that they would broadcast to other people, or maybe they're allowing them to broadcast a bits of a scripting language too. I'm not sure. I'm curious to see how that works. Blizzard is probably doing some stuff with this, although I don't know for sure, because clearly they've had some really advanced editors, right? And when you see mods like Defense of the Ancients, which are huge in certain parts of the world for Warcraft 3, bigger really than Warcraft 3 itself ever was.
It spawned a new genre.
That's built on the stuff they did. So I have to imagine that with StarCraft 2, they're thinking of maybe providing a way to package that up. Because still with Defense of the Ancients, you have to download their stuff and install it to whenever. It's not at all visible to someone who doesn't know how to use Google. So yeah, I imagine they're going to try to solve that problem, but I don't know for sure.
Or you'd need to know the community that those kinds of files are hosted in to get into modding.
Yeah, of course. You
need to think to even look for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You definitely have to Google. Luckily, Civ Fanatics has a really good Alexa rank.
Yeah. It is this weird problem. There's all this stuff available, but how do you make people even know that they can go look for something like that? Most people are just missing that first step.
Advertisement. One commercial. One commercial that mentions that you would get a surge of freaks and retards. I'm sorry.
I think you see some games that actually put stuff on the main menu of the game. That's maybe the best way to go. Every player sees that.
I'm actually trying to solve this problem with the project I'm working on, but just giving up on retail whatsoever and just doing it through the web. The parts of the game that you want to modify, you edit it on the web, it stays on the web, it stays on our server, and that's the end of the story, right? And that's going to limit what you can mod right off the bat until our technology base grows, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, here's another question that I think I've heard you mention this on a couple of other either podcasts or on your blog, that you think strategy gaming is kind of in trouble. It's the what do they call it? Fighter Sim Death Spiral.
Right.
I believe Sid actually came up with that term from actually working on fighter sims. They basically get so complicated, and then they squeeze out their own fringe audience, and then it gets more hardcore.
Yeah, exactly.
et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. You know, the way we always joke is the manuals get bigger and bigger, and the sales get smaller and smaller. You know, and yeah, I mean, I'm afraid that's happened with strategy games, where, especially with RTS games, where there's just this kind of like huge, very high baseline of conventions that everyone's supposed to know when you go into game. You know, about what left click means, what right click means, what population count means, what your base means, what even the whole point of the game is. You give Age of Empires to someone who doesn't know what RTS is supposed to be, and they'll just be spending the time building farms and being like, "Oh, this is kind of neat." You know, look, they're watering their farms, and then 10 minutes in, they'll get completely rampaged and they'll have no idea what's going on. It's
noob.
It's a pretty big leap to make for a lot of people. Yeah, so I mean that's something I'm worried about. Like I think, and it's also I think kind of disappointing because we're only really making one type of real-time strategy game. Real-time strategy used to mean a much more varied thing than it means nowadays. I think if there was, but I think a big part of the
now it pretty much means resource collection, which converts into units which you crush your opponents with.
Well, when the advent of the 3D age, a lot of game types got kind of obsoleted.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of, I think a big part of the problem is that there's only one avenue there. For a long time, there's only been one avenue for these type of games to come through, which is a $50 box at Best Buy. But now that's changing. But I haven't necessarily seen a ton of new types of strategy games come through the new distribution pipes. I think it's kind of so far. I think it's benefited other genres a lot more than it has strategy games. But I'm certainly hopeful for the future. I think with things like Steam and the web and Live Arcade, there should be a lot more.
Something like Tower Defense and Plants vs. Zombies. That's something we didn't have before.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the best RTS I've played the last few years has been desktop tower defense.
Zombies, the great undiscovered genre.
Yep. So yeah, I'm hopeful for the future, but yeah, I do wish that we could make strategy games with AAA production values that weren't the same variation of StarCraft, Age of Empires, Command & Conquer, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much what you got, Now, I have a question for you, and this is probably on a lot of people's minds, curious to know what you're working on now. Now, Soren, can I ask you an aside question off the record really quick?
Sure.
You're doing some kind of beta test.
Right.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I'm doing a beta.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm doing a beta test. I'm making a website that's built for strategy games, so that you can play. I mean, right now the games are fairly simple, but there's just a way to be able to play games with your friends online through your browser. Right now there's a card game. There's like a tactics, advanced wars type game. There's like a sort of a risk-style territorial control game, and the multiplayer.
These are all, by the way, very, very, very basic games,
right?
Which is kind of a lot of people were wondering about that.
Yeah.
They played the game and they're like, "Well, this games are so basic. What's the? Is this a test? Are we testing certain types of code?" Or are these going to be produced games?
What do you want to offer that hasn't been done in other games already?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say right now they're mostly sort of technological test beds. There will be, more advanced and developed games coming down the pipe. But on the other hand, I also view the games that I've developed so far as kind of atoms for greater things. Like, for example, the little tactics game, right? I mean, like, perhaps as it is right now, it's just a simple game that's kind of fun, but once you make it moddable, well, now people can make their own units, they can make their own maps, they can make, scenarios, they can make campaigns. Maybe people can start, if we get the technology ability, people will start scripting AIs for it. You can build custom leagues. You can, there's a bunch of things you can do. But that sort of basic, atom of like, card games can work online. Little grid-based games can work online. That's kind of like was my first step down this road.
And by the way, Soren, if it's all right, listeners, we'll have a link for you to come join the beta. You just have to go to WePlayCiv.com. Is that what it is, Wouter?
Yeah, sure. Replaysif.com and post in the thread in the, the community forums if you want to sign up.
Yeah, and then you'll get access.
We'll add you.
Yeah. So we'll provide that link for you guys, Soren, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I mean, the beta is open to everyone. I mean, we just have
yeah, that's public.
we just have a small step for getting into the sort of the private forum where we talk about it, but there's really no limitation on membership. Anyone can play. We want people to play. I'm not really looking to overwhelm our server right now because it is really just a test, just to see how this goes. But I want people to play. So, it's not really something we're advertising, but certainly for the the community of people who listen to this podcast. I think that would be exactly the type of people we'd like to try the game out. And I'm hoping to expose some of the modding stuff soon. So. Now probably a good time for people who are interested in modding to try to check it out. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Like it will work, but there will be definitely issues. So, that's sort of inherent in working on a beta test. But I hope the people who try it out, see not just what's there right now, but see what the potential is. That's to me what's exciting about making strategy games on the web is you can do interesting 2D stuff right now, and there's nothing preventing us from making more complex games. It's just a matter of time and attention and effort.
Hey, and Soren, don't forget the mobile age. All those games for mobiles now. Big bucks in those little apps you get for your fancy phones.
Yep, it's true.
Yeah, I wonder.
And these games right here look perfect to be ported over right now to a mobile OS,
Yep, no, that's true. There's more potential clients than we can think of, and Facebook and MySpace. There's so many different places you can stick a game nowadays. So
and there's money there right now. There's whole companies starting up.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, the long-term goal, are you really working towards sort of like a real full game like an Icarium or World of Warcraft, but then all online and in the browser, or is it really meant as a platform or both?
I'd say both. There's a number of ideas I have for games I'd like to try on the web, and some of them are bigger and some of them are smaller, and we've started with the smaller ones. But a big part of the project is also, making games that are going to enable other people to make interesting games that, they can share with their friends. If someone, makes this really interesting mod for the tactics game, they're going to be, the people going out there on forums like, hey, check out this game I made, check out these rules I did, so on and so forth. People already do that, when there's a lot of people who will, pimp Fall from Heaven, obviously, but not everyone has Civ 4, not everyone's willing to install a mod, so on and so forth. But when something's on the web, all they have to do is click on a link and they can try it right away,
Yeah. That'd be sick. Well, so what do you really got your fingers into right now, Soren, is what I want to know.
What's that?
What do you really, really got your fingers into right now? Any spoilers?
What's coming next? Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to be tight-lipped about anything else coming down the pipe. But if you're interested in this project, just try it out, join the forum, and every month or so there'll be something something new, interesting that comes down.
Yeah, well, I tried, guys, listeners. I tried to poke him for what he's doing next, but he's tight-lipped.
So,
all right, you try, Ken.
let me give this a try. Soren. When I was at 4Axis, I heard some rumors, though I never actually got to see any of the thing. But they said that you had made a really, really awesome prototype for a game that never got made. Is it cool to talk about this, or is this something you might think of trying to re-implement in your new system?
That's an interesting question. Yes, there was a game I worked on between Civ 3 and Civ 4. And a lot of people really did love it. It was a very, very fun game to play. It was multiplayer. It was real time. It was half an hour to an hour sessions. It wasn't something we were able to move into production. Which was too bad. But I do think the ideas behind it are solid game design ideas. It's nothing that you haven't necessarily seen other places, but maybe not in this specific combination, if that makes sense. It is new. It would be seen as innovative, and it was fun. So I think.
Question mark?
There's no doubt that I do feel like that's some unfinished business there because I felt like I made a really fun game, really fun design, and it wasn't, it's still locked away, from people.
Well, Soren, sounds like you need to start a game company.
Now, does this get into the whole idea of the 2K viewing Firaxis as the Civilization studio, and that was, you think, one of the reasons why this didn't go anywhere? Because it didn't fit with the model of what
Yeah, well, I think it's probably...
the studio was supposed
It's
to
going to be
make.
difficult for me to comment on what's going on inside of Firaxis, especially now. Yeah, back then, well,
Well, I mean, back then. I mean,
ultimately, I put a lot of time into Civilization, and I just wasn't sure how much more I could give to the series, and I definitely did need to do something different, and...
Everyone needs a breath of fresh air, even modders.
Yep, and...
And yet, even now, you can't seem to write a column without talking about Civ 4.
yeah. Yeah, I'm all burnt out on Civilization, too. I mean, I'm messing around with my own stuff now. That's totally different.
So, but yeah, no, I have to look for opportunities to do stuff that I haven't done before, and yeah, of course, that was part of the reason I came to EA. So,
just a last question is, what about your personal life? Where do you live? Do you have a family? How's that going for you?
Yep, I live in Oakland, California. Nearby the offices are in Emeryville, which is where the Bay Bridge meets the East Bay. And I live with my lovely wife and my 1-year-old son.
Oh, congratulations!
Here in the Oakland Hills. Thank you very much. He's going to turn 1 on October 26th.
Oh, isn't it great? You have a little boy?
What's that?
You have a little boy?
Yeah, a little son.
Yep, I got a boy and I got a 3-month-old little girl right now.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, I really love it. I've loved it much more than I thought I would. I mean, I was looking forward to it, but I mean, I just you don't know what it feels like to be a parent until you actually are one.
Definitely, I agree with you. And the non-parents don't know what we know.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like a secret little club.
I was gonna try to figure out the end of this segment to be like a gay joke involving Ken and Wouter, but I wasn't really sure what I should go with, so I was gonna ask Peter.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
What do you think?
I didn't really catch what you were saying. The conversation is spotty, so...
Well, I was gonna make a joke that says that Ken and Wouter are gay.
Okay, hold on. Here, Tony. I got it one. Soren, how much do you make in royalties for those shirts with your name on them?
What the hell?
Which?
They were really popular in the 90s. They had like this little nerdy-looking guy with a bunch of scantily clad women on them.
Are you talking about those Johnson shirts?
Yes.
God.
How much money did you ever see from that?
They totally ripped me off. I got nothing.
Call in today. In North America, the number is 301-637-7659. That's 301-637-POLY. In Europe, 44121-288-7659. That's 44121-288-POLY. You can Skype us at The PolyCast or email us at thepolycast@gmail.com.
The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
For more information on ModCast,
Revcast, or
PolyCast, or about PolyCast in general, log on to the series' official website at thepolycast.net. Today we've been joined with Soren Johnson, and he's told us all about all kinds of stuff. Also, today we've been joined with Kenneth, Impaler WRG Ferland,
Farewell, mortals.
Wouter, Locutus, Snijders,
Good night.
Peter, Maniac, Steenbeke.
Sweet dreams.
I'll never say your name right. I try every time. And me, Tony, GarretSidzaka, Kiehl. As always, we hope to hear from you guys soon. And listeners, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.
Hey, you skipped over Soren.
Don't forget me.
Say goodbye to all the listeners.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. It was fun to be here.
Thank you for coming. I hope we didn't bore you too much. and we are pretty crazy over here, so...
Yep, no, it's cool.
Yeah,
All right.
crazy like a fox.
We'll do it. Happy to do it again.
Record date, October 14th, 2009. Civilization 4, Warlords Beyond the Sword sound clips, copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright 2009, Civilized Communications at civcom.net.
Hold on, guys. Got a phone call.
Whatever, Ken. Is that the president?
Okay.